want you to think about this with me. It is a terrible thing to be physically or emotionally abused. But it is far worse when you have the capacity to end it now and you don't. The reality is that God gives us a biblical model of what a godly relationship should look like in our home. How does that relationship work? Well, as parents, you become the image of who God is to your children. Look at each other. I'm asking you to all just take a moment and look at each other right now. All of us, each and every single one of us, represents the home. We represent the church, and we represent the community. And so we need to ask ourselves the big questions. Is there an absence of love in my family? Is there an absence of love in my community? Is there an absence of love in my church? Do we as a church condone and foster an absence of love? And what is love? What is love? Fortunately for us, God has blessed us with a clear description of what love is. And we find that in 1 Corinthians 13, verses 4 through 13. In that we read that love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. But where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when completeness comes, what is in part disappears. When I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me. For now we see only a reflection as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. And now these three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. Our children get their concept of God and love as a result of how they are treated and how they see their loved ones being treated by the significant adults in their lives. So if the method used to communicate in the home is with hitting, punching, slapping, verbal abuse, or any of these related things, it will be difficult for that child to have a godly understanding of what love and trust are. Those things are a sign of a broken foundation in the family. And what is domestic violence? Domestic violence includes physical abuse, sexual abuse, and emotional abuse. Women and children are most often affected, but women can abuse too. To be sure, there is no hierarchy of abuse. Each one is equally destructive. Abuse is more than just an argument or disagreement. It includes fear, control, domination, victimization, and harm. Someone is being hurt. Physical abuse is the killing or harm done to another person. It can start with minor bruising, but could end in murder. Sexual abuse can be inappropriate touching and verbal remarks. Rape, molestation, and incest are also included in that category of sexual abuse. Looking at emotional abuse, it hurts or disables a person's psyche. That's what that is. It is words and behaviors that destroy another person's belief in themselves. It humiliates them and reduces their self-esteem. Destroying someone's identity and depriving someone of economic resources, these are all psychologically and emotionally abusive. This, domestic violence, this is a very important issue to God because we were never created to be abused. In fact, God hates this intensely. Let me share with you. Go with me to the book of Psalms, and we'll be looking at chapter 11. Oops, sorry. Okay, and this part in Psalms is about the time period when David was being persecuted by Saul. But before we start this examination, I want you to understand that King David had a broken family. He had a broken family himself. We aren't going to go to turn there, but I want you to remember that he had a son, Amnon. And Amnon had fallen desperately in love with his half-sister Tamar. He had fallen so desperately and deeply in love with her to the point where he plotted and eventually raped her. And his father, David, what did he do? What did he do about the rape? Because he learned about it. He did nothing. David did nothing. I'm certain, as the daughter, once you know that your father knows, you expect him to do something. He did nothing. But her brother, Absalom, he knew about the rape too. He was well aware of the rape. And what did he do? He waited. Absalom waited. 2 years he waited. And after 2 years, he took his revenge for the abuse done to his sister. He killed his brother. No doubt about it. The foundation in that family was a hot mess. So when we read in Psalm 11, and this is going to be verse 3, David understands the brokenness. He says, if the foundations are destroyed, what can the righteous do? He asked that question. Well, we can only trust God. And then what does he say in verse 5? Let's read and see. He says, the Lord tests the righteous. So he does test all of us. He tests the righteous and the unrighteous. But the Lord tests the righteous. But the wicked and the one who loves violence, his soul hates. So if you think about that, really think about that. God's soul hates those that love violence. It is obvious We can safely say that God is disgusted with violence of every shape and form, whether it's in the home, whether it's in the church, or whether it's in the community. As a matter of fact, David is not alone here. In the New Testament, in the book of James, he addresses a very similar question. Let's go to James chapter 4. And we will be reading from verse 1. In that verse, James starts by asking, what causes fights and quarrels among you? That's the question that's asked. But then he gives us an answer, continuing. Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? And so then we have to ask ourselves, what are these desires that battle within us? And he gives us an understanding of that as well, because we look at verse 3, and in verse 3, he explains, when you ask, you do not receive because you ask with wrong motives, that you may spend what you get on your own pleasures. So then the question becomes, what is that wrong motive? What is that wrong motive? Selfishness. And what is selfishness? Selfishness is a desire to satisfy whatever urge we may have at the expense of someone else. These desires can range from sexual to the desire to control and dominate. We need to remember that both male and female can be guilty of selfishness, which causes violence and abuse. We tend to think of an angry person as someone who acts out in fits of violence, someone that has a bad temper. Yes, that's one description. You can say that. But anger can be reflected in so many other ways. How about a controlling, critical, unbending person? For all intents and purposes, this person may always seem to be in control. But are they really? An individual like that, even if he or she doesn't fly off the handle, is also displaying characteristics of selfishness. So, let's consider some facts. Worldwide, 1 out of every 3 women has been abused in some form. In Latin America and the Caribbean, 6 out of 10 women have suffered physical or psychological abuse by their intimate partner. In Canada, domestic violence costs the country $1.6 billion per year. And in the United States, this country, this America, 200 women are raped or battered per hour. Per hour, people. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men will experience domestic violence during their lifetime. So many victims are so hesitant, so unwilling to seek help, not because they don't know they need help, but because of the fear and shame involved with being abused by someone they love. You all may be thinking, this doesn't really apply to me. This is something that happens around the world. It happens out there. It doesn't happen to me. It doesn't happen to anybody that I know. But the reality is that domestic violence has been documented as a major issue within the Seventh-day Adventist Church. So why is this important? Well, God has given us a model that we can use to impact our children. And so why is this important? Why? Because it emphasizes the need to end it now. End It Now seeks to increase personal awareness, responsibility, and involvement to effectively help end violence against women and girls in every family and community. Because really, there is no way that we can ever wonder if it's an issue that concerns us. So then what can we do? Well, the wonderful news is that God is the one that can use us to uplift humanity. We were created by a perfect God to be in significant and fulfilling relationships. In essence, God intends us for all our relationships to be a reflection of Him. And how does He do it? Well, we must acknowledge that unlike God, we are not perfect. And because of these imperfections, we do struggle to apply biblical principles to our relationships. I want to share with you what it says in the Ministry of Healing. And this is found in the Ministry of Healing's page 349. Tells us the restoration and uplifting of humanity begins in the home. Out of the heart are the issues of life. And the heart of the community, of the church, and of the nation is the household. And so this is why Jesus explains in the Gospel of Matthew. Actually, let's go there. Let's go to Matthew chapter 18. And in Matthew chapter 18, verse 5, in verse 6, Jesus tells us, "But if anyone causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him to have a large millstone hung around his neck and be drowned in the depths of the sea." Did you hear that? Did you hear what Jesus said? It would be better to have a large millstone hung around their neck and drowned in the depths of the sea. Jesus is saying that if anyone here is responsible to cause one of these children to be in a situation where they will be forced to sin, that person has a big problem with God. And how can we cause a child to sin? Well, since we as adults are directly responsible for the choices a child makes, setting a bad example is one way of causing a child to sin. They get their foundation by watching how we live, how we act, and how we react. The children in our lives, the children in our world, are able to discern when our words do not match up with our actions. It can't be do as I say, but not as I do. As we focus on this issue of domestic violence, we must take the time to ask ourselves some very hard questions. but not just ask these questions, but be able to actually answer them for ourselves as well. Am I an angry person? Do I use anger as a shield to cover my deep feelings of unmet emotional needs? Are there individuals in the home, at work, or at church who are scared of me? Do I have to have things my way? Do I have a tendency to need to be in control no matter what? Do I get upset when others do not agree with me? Has anyone ever told me that I'm an angry or selfish or a controlling person? It is so very difficult for us to see ourselves, to evaluate our actions and motives. Many times we are guilty of doing wrong, and we are not aware of it. This is why we may want to follow David's example and make Psalm 139, that part of the song, a daily prayer for us. Let's look at Psalm 139 and look at verses 23 and 24. In that psalm, David prays the Lord, and he asks the Lord, "Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting." We really seriously should consider making that a part of our daily life, asking God to continually search us, reveal to us those things that need to be changed so that we can be an actual better reflection of who Jesus is in us. If we are honest with ourselves, we will admit that at some time in our lives, we have been or are presently guilty of inflicting hurt and pain on a loved one. And if we are truly serious about how we relate to others, to God, relative to this issue of abuse, we must start with a very important step. And what is that step? That first step is to acknowledge to yourself and to God that you have been abusive or controlling in whatever form. Then ask for His forgiveness. We have already established that abuse is a sin against God. God is love. And God's love for us is unconditional. God wants us to love Him. But He gives us the freedom to make that choice. God does not force us to love Him. So if someone is afraid in a relationship, then that is not love. Everyone deserves a violence-free life. No one deserves to be beaten or humiliated. We read in 1 John 4:18, God's understanding of fear. Because love has no fear. There is no fear in love. But perfect love drives out fear. Because fear has to do with punishment. And the one who fears is not made perfect in love. Have any of you ever felt fear? Have any of you ever been afraid because you've been abused? I want you to know that you're not alone. I've seen things that as a child I should never have seen. I've heard things as a child that I should never have heard. I've been afraid. I did not grow up in the model of a godly relationship at home. I was one of those children that witnessed the violence in my family home. The way that my father abused my mother. And I assure you, it's not anything that I could ever forget. So I ask that we not do this to those precious little children in our lives. Allow them the opportunity to have happy memories and an unbroken foundation in their family. It is my hope that this morning, the things that I shared with you have given you pause to stop and think. And while you're listening to me this morning, that you also heard the Holy Spirit ministering to you for the desire to break any chains of abuse that you may have in your family, in your heart. And the best way to do that is to turn over your selfishness. Turn over our selfishness. We have to do that. And in all honesty, there's only one person that I know of that can help us to do that. So if your heart has quickened in recognition of the abuse that you may have inflicted on someone you love, then please, I beg of you, turn it over to Jesus. He is the only person that I know who can help you. Allow Jesus to be the centerpiece of your life. And with that, He can guide you as you take the steps necessary to repair the broken foundation in your family.